Oscar Piastri led the Qatar Grand Prix from pole position with Max Verstappen sitting in second place behind him and Lando Norris running third. McLaren had both cars in strong positions and everything looked set for a dominant result, with the team possessing the fastest car on the grid and two talented drivers capable of securing a commanding 1-3 finish. Then, lap 7 arrived, and McLaren made a decision that turned what should have been a straightforward victory into a painful second-place finish and handed Verstappen a gift he never expected. Nico Hulkenberg's collision with Pierre Gasly brought out the safety car with 50 laps still to run, and the timing couldn't have been better for teams looking to make their first pit stop. The FIA had put a 25-lap limit on tyre stints for safety reasons, which meant the safety car arrived at the ideal moment when teams could swap tyres without losing significant track position. It was an opportunity too good to miss, and Red Bull didn't hesitate as they called Verstappen in from second place immediately. Mercedes brought both George Russell and Andrea Kimi Antonelli into the pits. Ferrari did likewise with Charles Leclerc, and up and down the pit lane, teams seized the moment. Every single outfit made at least one stop, every team that is, except McLaren. Piastri stayed out, and Norris stayed out as McLaren left both their drivers on track, gambling that their superior pace would allow them to overcome the disadvantage of pitting later. The team wanted to keep their options open for the remainder of the race, believing that staying out would give them strategic flexibility. But flexibility means nothing if you're stuck behind a car that pitted under the safety car and now has fresher tyres. Norris saw the problem immediately, and his radio message to race engineer Will Joseph was pointed. "We should have just followed him in." "No, if we knew the car ahead was staying out." Joseph tried to justify the call by saying, "They have lose all of their flexibility for the remainder of the race." But Norris had read the situation correctly, as McLaren had just handed Verstappen the race. When racing resumed, Piastri did everything he could by pushing hard, setting competitive lap times, and trying to build enough of a cushion to make the strategy viable. The problem was simple mathematics, because even after Piastri completed his second pit stop, he emerged only 10 seconds ahead of Verstappen, and that margin wasn't close to enough. McLaren realized their error and brought Piastri in again. But the race was already slipping away as Verstappen controlled proceedings from the front with the calm assurance of a driver who knows he's been handed an unexpected advantage. He managed his tyres, maintained his gap, and cruised to victory by more than 12 seconds in what was a dominant performance, but one that should never have been possible. Piastri had the pace to win, and he proved that all weekend, but pace alone couldn't overcome a strategic mistake of this magnitude. Norris endured an even more difficult afternoon because before his pit stop, he suffered what he described as a wild moment at turn 14 that caused damage to his car. When he rejoined after pitting, he found himself in 5th place, with Carlos Sainz and Kimi Antonelli ahead of him. And the final laps became an exercise in frustration as Norris sat glued to the back of Antonelli's Mercedes. He was close enough to use DRS on the main straight, but unable to find a way through, and only when Antonelli ran wide at turn 10 with 2 laps remaining, did Norris finally get past to claim 4th. 2 extra points were salvaged from a disastrous day, but hardly the result McLaren needed when they had both cars perfectly positioned to dominate the race from the front. Piastri's radio message after crossing the finish line said everything when he told his team, "I don't have any words." The broadcast described him as livid, and with good reason, because McLaren had taken a race he dominated and thrown it away with one poor decision. When he faced the media afterward, Piastri maintained his composure but couldn't hide his disappointment, as he said, "We didn't get it right tonight. I drove the best race that I could. I tried my best. It just wasn't to be tonight." The question about the safety car decision drew the most revealing response when Piastri said, "I think in hindsight it was pretty obvious what we should have done." That word, choice, matters, because he didn't say debatable or difficult, but obvious, meaning this wasn't a 50-50 call that could have gone either way, but rather a clear error that everyone in the paddock knew about. "I'm sure we will discuss it as a team," Piastri added before noting, "It's not all bad, it's been a real good weekend, but it's a little bit tough to swallow at the moment." Inside the McLaren garage, the atmosphere was grim, as Zach Brown typically speaks to Sky Sports right after every race, but this time he declined. The team informed broadcasters that Brown wouldn't be available until after the podium ceremony, and Ted Kravitz, reporting from the pit lane, chose his words carefully when he said the mood in McLaren was shell-shocked. This wasn't ordinary disappointment, but rather a team reeling from a self-inflicted wound that could cost them the championship. And the mathematics are brutal because McLaren should have locked out the front row and finished 1st and 3rd at minimum. Piastri had the speed to win, while Norris, despite his struggles, belonged on the podium, but instead they finished second and fourth while Verstappen took maximum points. The championship standings now show Verstappen just 12 points behind Norris, when in August that gap was 104 points, meaning Verstappen has clawed his way back into contention, and McLaren's mistakes have helped him every step of the way. For Piastri personally, the damage is severe as he trails Norris by 16 points and sits 4 points behind Verstappen, having gone from leading the race to third in the championship. His title hopes aren't mathematically dead, but they're fading fast. And the worst part is that none of this happened because he made an error, since he drove brilliantly all weekend while his team let him down. This marks the second consecutive weekend where McLaren has had to apologize to their drivers, because last week in Las Vegas, both cars were disqualified after the race for illegal skid blocks. Team principal Andrea Stella apologized directly to both drivers for that mistake, and 7 days later, they've committed another error that's arguably even more costly. The pattern is deeply concerning because McLaren has built the fastest car on the grid and they have two talented drivers capable of winning races, but their operational execution and strategy calls have repeatedly failed when it matters most. The decision to leave both cars out under the safety car will be debated for a long time, with some suggesting McLaren was trying to treat both drivers equally by keeping them on identical strategies. Others will note that Red Bull would never make such a fundamental error, as when the safety car came out, Verstappen's engineer made the call instantly with no hesitation and no overthinking. McLaren tried to be clever and paid a heavy price. And what makes the mistake even harder to accept is that nothing else happened in the race. The safety car on lap 7 was the only significant incident, so if McLaren had been hoping for another safety car later to help their strategy, that gamble failed because the race ran clean from that point forward, which meant Verstappen's early stop gave him an advantage he never surrendered. The championship battle now heads to Abu Dhabi with 3 drivers still in contention, as Norris leads on 408 points, Verstappen has 396, and Piastri sits on 392. Norris can secure the title with a third-place finish regardless of what his rivals do, but after 2 straight weekends of costly mistakes, McLaren's ability to execute under pressure is now seriously in question. They have the fastest car and the talent, yet they face one final race to prove they can handle the pressure, one race to show they've learned from their errors, and one race to avoid being remembered as the team that had the fastest car and the best drivers, but still managed to lose a championship they should have won. What will it take for McLaren to finally get their strategy calls right when the championship is on the line in Abu Dhabi? After watching the team throw away a certain victory in Qatar through a baffling pit stop decision, and coming off a disqualification in Las Vegas just 1 week prior, the pattern of operational failures has become impossible to ignore. With Norris holding just a 12-point lead over Verstappen and Piastri, only 4 points behind his teammate, McLaren finds themselves in a position where they have everything needed to win except the one thing that matters most: flawless execution under pressure. Can they learn from back-to-back weekends of self-inflicted wounds and deliver a clean, mistake-free performance when it counts? Or will we witness another strategic blunder that costs them a championship their car and drivers clearly deserve? The final race will answer whether McLaren's speed can overcome their operational struggles